Humans have accomplished wonders on earth. Our penetrating vision is unveiling the mysteries of nature. We are endlessly watching the world around us. The seers of the Upanishads carefully studied this attribute of human nature thousands of years ago. They observed that all our sensory organs open outwardly. Hence, by nature, we are bound to always seek outwards. As a result, our mind and intellect always remain entangled in the external world. The changes of the world keep us oscillating between pleasure and pain. Modern scientific accomplishments have failed to give us lasting happiness. But the sages of ancient India invented a unique technique of keeping the mind free and peaceful. This technique is documented in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The Yoga Sutras are like the compilation of answers of an inquiring mind. It opens with the aphorism, "Now begins the exposition of yoga." The question arises, what is yoga? Yoga is the cessation of the changing modes of Chitta Consciousness. The next question one may ask, what is the benefit of practicing yoga? Through yoga, the seer abides in his own self. Does that mean we dwell in some other form? Throughout our lives, we identify ourselves with the changing modes of Chitta Consciousness. Do we live in changing modes of consciousness throughout our lives? Do we never ever know our own true self? What a tragedy it would be that we know the whole world and not know our own self. So what is our real nature? Patanjali describes the layers that cover the self and provides techniques to uncover them. Who was Patanjali? What was the nature of Yoga Shastra which he propounded? What was the nature of yoga before Patanjali? What form did it take after Patanjali? Is the history of yoga linked to the history of religion and faith? Or is it the story of an honest effort by man to conquer disease, old age, and death? We seek the answers with our journey into India's 6,000 years of known history. The story of philosophy on which the Indian mind is based is a story of India itself. It is generally believed that Patanjali was from the Nag tribe. He was the writer of 3 treatises, Vyakran Mahabhashya, Yoga Sutras, and Ayurveda Samhita. With Yoga Shastra, he eliminated the impurities of the mind. Through grammar, he eliminated the impurities of speech, and through his composition on Ayurveda, the ailments of the body. If it is true that all these 3 Shastras were composed by a single man, Patanjali, then we can say he was certainly an extraordinary genius. Here is the famous fort of Chittor, which finds a small connection with sage Patanjali. In his composition on grammar, Patanjali gives an illustration. Madhyamika is being surrounded by the Greeks. Madhyamika was the ancient name of Chittor. Greek warriors surrounded the fort of Chittor between 184 to 148 BC. This illustration suggests that Patanjali may have lived during the time of King Pushyamitra Shung. Also, an inscription on the rock edict says that Patanjali performed a yagya for King Pushyamitra Shung. Very little else is known about his life. Amazingly, the Yoga Sutras that Patanjali wrote could be fitted onto one single page. This is his complete work on yoga, which was later elaborated by Maharishi Vyas. It is not known when the tradition of yoga came into existence, but on the basis of Sankhya Philosophy, Patanjali compiled the sutras with precise classifications, sequences, and logic. In the history of mankind, Patanjali is perhaps the first one who demystified the elements of consciousness and arranged them scientifically. Ancient Indians had applied a unique technique for seeking knowledge. Here, the experimentation, testing, and observation were not performed externally, but inside the human body and mind. It was believed all that exists in the human body, the same exists in the universe. So for acquiring knowledge, the use of telescope, microscope, or chemicals was not required. Instead, the observer himself became like a telescope and a microscope. It was believed that if the Chitta Consciousness of the observer is focused, pure, and peaceful, his vision would also become clear and focused. The process of concentrating the Chitta Consciousness is yoga. Therefore, yoga in India left its mark on many philosophies, arts, and sciences. But the concentration in yoga has a specific purpose. The way Ayurveda cures the diseases of the body, the same way yoga alleviates the disease of the mind, suffering. There are 4 chapters in Yoga Shastra. The first is Samadhipad. This chapter is meant for highly evolved practitioners. Here, various techniques and progressive dimensions of yogic concentrations are mentioned. After prolonged practice of concentration with total detachment, the state of self-realization is attained. The wisdom of the state is called Ritambhara Pragya. It is beyond the intellect. In fact, it removes the impressions of intellect. This state of samadhi cannot be achieved through ordinary wisdom. So the ordinary person has to start with yoga from the second chapter, Sadhanpad. Here, 8 limbs of yoga are explained sequentially: restraint, discipline, posture, regulation of breath, withdrawal, concentration, meditation, and samadhi. Yamas are 5: non-violence, truth, non-stealing, non-possession, and celibacy. Niyamas are also 5: cleanliness, contentment, austerity, recitation, and reverence for God. Patanjali saw God as a means for the cessation of the mind. He did not see God as the creator, destroyer, or operator of the universe. He was just a unit of consciousness which is free from the bondages of nature, Prakriti. The theory of yoga is Sankhya, which is atheist in nature. The priests of those times opposed it and tried to infuse elements of religion into it. Religion demands faith, but yoga is entirely existential, experiential, and experimental. The seeker, by controlling and regularizing his daily conduct through yam and niyam, sits in an asana. Asana is a comfortable and pleasant posture of the body. The body should not move. The vision should either be on the tip of the nose or the center of the eyebrows or at a target point. When one practices an asana for several hours, the body becomes steady and the Chitta Consciousness is rested in the infinite. On acquiring stability, the seeker then regulates the breath, and when the breath becomes subtle, that is pranayam. Pranayam purifies the mind and also cleanses the channels of energy. By making the breath subtler, the most hyperactive mind can also be controlled. After pranayam, the practice of withdrawing the mind from external objects and focusing it inwardly is practiced. Our life is nurtured through the sensory experiences of speech, touch, vision, taste, and smell, known as ahar. The reversal of this process, by withdrawing the senses from the external and taking ahar from within, is known as pratyahar. The inner journey of yoga begins from here. When the mind gets intermittently stabilized at any one point, that is known as dharana. The point of concentration can either be an object, real or abstract, or a thought. When dharana gets prolonged, it becomes dhyana. When dhyana gets extended further, it results in samadhi. Samadhi is the purest and steady state of being. Patanjali was not the discoverer of yoga. Where did it all begin? Traditionally, it is believed that Sankhya is the oldest philosophy of India. The Mahabharata also describes Sankhya and Yoga as Sanatana philosophies, that which have been in existence forever. But who was the first yogi? The name that resonates from the farthest end of Indian thought is that of Sage Kapil, the originator of Sankhya, the greatest achiever of yoga. In the Gita, Yogi Krishna declares, "Amongst the highest achievers, I am Kapil Muni." People believe that no one ever perfected yoga like Sage Kapil. But there are problems regarding the historical evidence of Kapil's existence. Therefore, let us begin the history of yoga from here. The figure of this 5,000-year-old seal appears to be that of a yogi in meditation. With respect to time and geographical area, the Indus Valley was the oldest and largest civilization on earth. Evidence of this yogi seal is found all over its biggest settlements.
The early form of Shiva is described as the Pashupati, which is supposed to be the horned deity. So a lot of scholars believe that perhaps this Pashupati, or the Lord of Beasts, probably was worshipped all over the Harappan region.
Professor Singh suggests that the animals depicted in this seal are Marutkans, and the human figure is Pashupati, Lord of the Beasts. To describe the seal, he refers to these mantras of the Rig Veda, where Pashupati is named as Rudra.
रुद्रस्य पुत्रा है, रुद्रस्य वीरा है, रुद्रस्य सूनव है, ये शब्द शुरू के मंत्रों में आ चुके हैं। ऐसी स्थिति में मरुदगण जो इसके देवता हैं, उनका रुद्र के साथ बहुत ही निकट संबंध स्थापित हो जाता है। रुद्र पिता हों और ये मरुदगण जो हैं उनके पुत्र हों। इन मरुदगणों को बाद में 7वें और 8वें मंत्र में रूपायित किया गया है पशुओं के द्वारा।
Surprisingly, the animals mentioned in these mantras of the Rig Veda are the same as depicted in the Harappa seal.
पशुपति को जो उनके पिता हैं और जो ध्यान की मुद्रा में है, वे शांभवी मुद्रा में स्थित हैं।
You can easily visualize Shambhavi Mudra in these twilight eyes, because here on this Harappa bust, the Shambhavi Mudra is clearly visible.
बाहर संसार को भी देख रहे हैं, साथ साथ अपने भीतर अंतर्हित हैं, योग की मुद्रा में हैं। अब वे भद्रासन में बैठे हुए हैं। इस बात को प्राय लोगों ने नहीं समझा है। भद्रासन बड़ा विकट होता है, जिसमें कि दोनों एड़ियां जो हैं इस तरह से मिल जाती हैं।
Also in this mantra, the animals are shown with emotions of excitement, as if these children want to seek the attention of their father.
और योग की स्थिति यही है कि तरह तरह के डिस्टर्बेंसेस क्यों ना हों, लेकिन फिर भी व्यक्ति की चित्त वृत्ति जो है वो सब शांत हो करके और योगस चित्त वृत्ति निरोध की स्थिति में बनी रहे।
Scholars who have worked on that particular seal, they say that it is wearing so many bangles. And if you see it from side, probably it is a woman. The scholar who points out this says that during the Harappan period, mainly the cult was that of the mothers.
This statue was created 2,000 years after the Harappa civilization. Here also the mother goddess is shown with 3 faces and seated in a yogic asana. In the present time also, women of this area wear similar bangles.
There is one female figurine found almost all over the Harappan region. And sometimes the female figure is shown with lot of with exaggerated organs. Excavation I am doing now, in fact, in the Gaggar Basin. I did the work at a site called Farmana, which is close to Rohtak. We have found the Harappan graveyard, which is spread over an area of roughly 3.5 hectares, much larger than the cemetery found at Harappa. And we are applying, in fact, most recent scientific techniques for analysis. What we have observed so far, that the women were, in fact, were buried in the center of the cemetery, and they were buried with all their ornaments intact. Whereas, in case of the males, in fact, sometimes, the fractional bones are found. There are no ornaments, only few pots. So the very, evidence indicating that, they were in the center part, and with all their, paraphernalia, in fact, buried along with that. That shows that, perhaps the status of the woman was really good in the society that time.
If we consider the role of women at the center of Harappa civilization, and this seal to be that of Mother Goddess, then there is a strong possibility that Harappa society was matriarchal. The legendary 19th century Indian philosopher and writer Bankim Chandra Chatterjee writes, "The sound of the drummers of the Durga festival reminds us of the Sankhya philosophy." What made him think so? Let's understand Sankhya, the philosophy of Yoga. The ancient texts state that Sankhya and Yoga are one. If Sankhya is the theory, Yoga is its practice. Sankhya means accurate knowledge. Coincidentally, Sankhya also means numbers. To put it simply, it is a philosophy of the elements of nature in which the conscious entity is entangled. For the disentanglement of the self, the Sankhya philosophers used to meditate on the elements of nature. Sankhya considers two basic constituents in every living being: primal nature and conscious entity. Primal nature is known as Prakriti. Prakriti is the equilibrium of three basic elements: Sattva, Raj, and Tam. The conscious entity is known as Purusha. Pur meaning limits or boundary, and Sha meaning restfulness. Each Purusha residing in the body boundary is a restful unit of consciousness. Purusha is not one, but many. Prakriti is a single entity that extends throughout the universe and is very powerful. There are three root characteristics in this world: static, action, and light. There is something in this world which creates resistance and brings stagnancy. This is known as tamas. In this world, everything is active. This activeness of the world is known as rajas. The third one, which illuminates the world and the self and brings enlightenment to them, is known as sattva. Sattva, Raj, and Tam are the three fundamental units of Prakriti. Poets have spoken of them in white, red, and black. Sattva, Raj, and Tam are always found together. The primordial state in equilibrium is known as Prakriti. Any imbalance among them results in a transformation known as Vikriti. The world that we see around us is the Vikriti, or transformation, of Prakriti. In the process of evolution, the three elements of Prakriti are transformed into 24 elements of nature. Here, Purusha is totally detached and inactive observer. Sankhya considers Prakriti as the sole creator. Only Prakriti creates this world. Prakriti is also symbolized as a conceiver and a dancer, and is often compared with the personality of a woman. Professor D.P. Chattopadhyay suggests that the concepts of Sankhya, Yoga, and Tantra may have originated from the rituals, principles, and fabric of the matriarchal societies of that time. Wearing bangles, this Mother Goddess is seated in a yogic asana. This shows that Sankhya and Yoga were an integral part of the matriarchic society of Harappa. When the lifestyle of the Harappa people is studied, one finds that yam and niyam of yoga were practiced by these people. The most astonishing fact about this civilization is its abstinence from violence for almost 2,000 years. The yam of yoga brings self-discipline, and it seems that civil discipline was natural to these people, because amazingly, there is no evidence of centralized authoritarian rule.
There is no evidence of king or queen. We don't have palaces in fact in the Harappan levels. Probably it was controlled or maybe administered by a group of people. That is sort of a democracy in fact that the Harappans had introduced. The democracy in this country has survived without any threat. So this is again the important contribution in fact of the Harappans.
In spite of being peace-loving, these people were not careless about their self-defense. Here stands a strong fortification, the wall of the Harappa city of Dholavira.
We do not know why such a strong fortifications were made, because we do not have any evidence of violence. We do not have very good evidence about the offensive implements or defensive implements used by or produced by the Harappans or used by the Harappans. And at none of the sites we have any evidence of any violence at all. So in a way they were peace-loving people. That's what we can conclude.
The spirit of non-violence is the first step towards evolution. And this is the first lesson of yoga. And the second lesson is to keep the body strong and clean. Cleanliness is the first niyam of yoga. The body is cleansed by the process of dhoti, neti, and bathing. Even today, bathing has great significance in Indian culture. The biggest structure of Harappa towns are their bathing pools. People gave great importance to clean and hygienic environs.
We can certainly say that the Harappan cities were very, very clean, because the drainage system that they introduced inside the cities were perfectly hygienic. Every household we find the evidence of bathroom, and in some of the big houses, either in the front courtyard or in the back courtyard, we find the Harappan wells. The bathrooms are connected to the drainage system, so the entire network was connected to the main drainage, and a main drainage was taken outside the fortification. They did not allow any dirty water to be sprayed within the cities. When we talk about the contribution of the Harappan to the world history, this is the contribution that they were the first people in fact in the world to develop cities, and they have taught the world how to develop well-planned modern cities.
The third limb of Patanjali's yoga is asana. The Hatha-Yogic asanas of the medieval period are so difficult that they are not included in Patanjali's definition of asanas. Bhadrasana is among the best 4 asanas of Hatha Yoga. Patanjali is silent on these. But interestingly, some difficult Hatha Yogic asanas are clearly visible in these 5,000-year-old Harappa terracotta figurines. Therefore, it is wrong to believe that Hatha Yoga originated in the medieval period.
By the time these terracotta figures were formed in yogic asanas, yoga had already made considerable progress by that time, because the God himself is shown in a yogic posture.
The impression of Hatha Yoga is on the seals. Yam and niyam are part of their lifestyle. The status of women indicates the Sankhya Philosophy. These are the indisputable marks of yoga in the Harappa civilization. With the decline of the Harappa civilization, India moved from the prehistoric period to historical times, when the readable literature of the Vedas came into being. There are 4 Vedas, each of which has many Brahman subtexts. Related to each Brahman texts, there are the Aranyaks and most famously the Upanishads. Fixing the time period for this vast literature has remained a difficult task.
Rigveda itself has different layers, earlier and later portions. Still, sober thinking now accepts that Rigveda can be dated from anywhere between 2000 to 3000 BC, at least.
The time of decay of the Harappa culture by natural calamities and the time of the writing of the Rig Veda seem to overlap. The geographical location of both these civilizations is also about the same. The description of the ideal city of the Rig Veda matches with the map of the Harappa city of Dholavira. There are many similarities between the Harappa and Vedic cultures. But was the Rig Veda begun by the people of Harappa? A definite answer cannot be given, but let us investigate this in the context of yoga. The Prakriti of Sankhya is the central core of Indian rational thought, whereas the Prakriti of Rig Veda is more like a poem from the heart. A poem that is full of knowledge, mysteries, and wonder. To understand the emotions, aspirations, and songs of humans 4,000 years ago, Rig Veda is the only document. The Rig Veda has been declared a World Heritage Document by UNESCO. The seers of the Rig Veda were attuned with Prakriti. It seems here as if yoga is a means to connect one's mind with the forces of nature.
उतयुंजते मन है उतयुंजते धिय यो ऋग्वेद ही बोल रहा है मन को बुद्धि को जोड़ना अंग्रेजी का योग है ये मन भी बैली है इधर उधर भागता है इसको भी जोड़ना एकाग्र करना.
But, as against the Harappa culture, Rig Vedic society is patriarchic. The act by which the Supreme Purush or Prajapati created the world is known as Yagna. In Yagna, Purusha sacrifices his essence into fire, just as man procreates by sacrificing his semen into Vedi or the womb.
Sacrifice is nothing else but the creation myth. That is, by sacrificing himself, Purusha created the world. So every person imitates that particular great act. And he goes on imitating so that he becomes one with him, the creator.
Here, Vedic mantras are sung with the same intonation, accent, and rhythm as were sung by their ancestors thousands of years ago.
By simply repeating something, you cannot gain it, no? It becomes more mechanical. So a point was there, that is why the Brahmanas came. That is what is the secret of the sacrifice. So every act was being explained. And why this is to be done? Because then it ultimately supports the meaning, which is the ultimate meaning of the sacrifice. Or symbolism of the sacrificial acts, you can say. So after the karma, jnana was more emphasized. There was a stage when that had to be emphasized. Then, ज्ञान तो मेरे जैसे लोगों को भी है ना, but I have not realized Brahman. By simply reading, by simply repeating words, cannot do that. And that is why it was realized that the Brahman is to be realized through meditation. Shrotavyo, mantavyo, nididhyasitavya. उसको अध्यास लगना चाहिए.
ऋग्वेद की सबसे अधिक प्रसिद्ध ऋचा गायत्री मंत्र है और इस गायत्री मंत्र में जो कुछ कहा गया है अगर उसे ठीक से समझ लें तो सारा योग का विस्तार समझ में आ जाएगा. गायत्री मंत्र जहाँ से चालू हुआ, धीमहि ध्यान करें, पूजा करें, नमस्कार करें, ये नहीं है. प्रार्थना करें, ये नहीं है. ध्यान करें, धीमहि. किसका ध्यान करें? सविता का. क्रिएटिविटी, सर्जनशीलता. योग का एक प्रयोजन है, व्यावहारिक प्रयोजन है, व्यक्ति की चेतना इतनी जागृत हो जाए कि वो नवीन का सर्जन कर सके.
The language of Veda is symbolic. The elements of yoga are found all over its literature. In the Rig Veda, Hiranyagarbha is considered as the primal propounder of yoga. The fierce and wild character of Rudra of Rig Veda remained throughout the later centuries with Yogi Shiva. The character and behavior of the Kesin Munis of the Rig Veda remind us of the later Hatha Yogis. They are called Vatrasna Muni, indicating Nadi Shuddhi and other pranayams.
अष्टाचक्र नवद्वारा देवानाम पूर्वयोध्या.
Innumerable references of technique and philosophy of yoga are found in the Atharva Veda, Brahmans, and Aranyakas. But the first revelation of the word yoga, in its classical sense, appears in the Taittiriya Upanishad and the Kat Upanishad. In Kat Upanishad, it is Yama, the king of death, who reveals the supreme knowledge and yoga together. The human desire of going beyond death is natural ever since our birth and is also the quest of yoga. Upanishads are also called Vedanta, the end portion of the Vedas. Chronologically, they were also written at the end of the Vedas.
The Upanishads will be something like 7th century BC, and as I explained to you that there are two phases. The Seshwara Upanishads, this is a term newly coined. This is not a Sanskrit term. Theistic Upanishads can be placed in the later period wherein Rudra is identified with the first principle. This is very significant because some of the proto-yoga things, practices, which are understood in the Aranyaka and Upanishad portions of the Veda as a whole, they are also presupposed by Buddhism, by Buddha, and to some extent by Mahavira.
Gautam Buddha was born in the 6th century BC in Lumbini, in the foothills of the Himalayas. His father, King Shuddhodhan, provided him with all the luxuries for his enjoyment and pleasure. But when he discovered the problems of old age, death, and disease, everything changed. At the age of 29, leaving behind his wife and son, the prince left home in search of the reality of life. He went deep into the forest, where yogis and ascetics used to practice. There in Vaishali, he met two yogis, Adar Kalam and Rudrak Ramputra. But, unconvinced by them, he went into isolation to perform rigorous penance. So intense was his determination that he put his life in extreme danger. But later he abandoned this rigorous practice and arrived at this place, and resting his back on the trunk of this peepal tree, sat in Padmasana. He resolved, "Let my body perish, but I will not leave this asana without knowing the ultimate reality." Here the asana finds its ultimate expression as propounded by Patanjali. He may also have practiced a mudra where the tongue touches the palate, which is the form called Kechari Mudra of medieval Hatha Yoga. At last, on the full moon day of the month of Vaishakh, he attained Nirvana. Buddha then sat in one asana for 7 long days, enjoying the bliss of liberation. Patanjali has described it as Ananda Nugat Samadhi. Then, through inhalation and exhalation, he meditated upon Pratitya Samudpad. This is known as Patanjali's Vitarka Nugat Samadhi. He then arose, walked, and stood here, motionless. This place later came to be known as Animesh Lochan, without blinking the eyes. For 7 continuous days, motionless, without blinking his eyes, he gazed upon his place of enlightenment. In Hatha Yoga, this practice of the blank gaze is known as Tratak and has great significance. Buddha's enlightenment preceded Patanjali by 300 years. As we see here, the precise use of asana, dhyana, and samadhi. Siddhartha Gautam Buddha, one of the greatest yogis of India, said, "I saw the ancient path and traversed upon it." Having used the doctrines and techniques of the time, Buddha marched ahead. He believed that the concept of the immortal soul of the Upanishads would not eliminate the sufferings of man, and also that the concept of the immortal Purusha of Sankhya would not wipe away the tears of man. His doctrine of dharma proclaims, "Come and see, ehi pasiko," not to believe from before, but to believe after seeing. And when you have seen already, where is the need to believe? But there are some fundamental questions that cannot be answered, but only realized. Lord Buddha called them avyaktani, that which is inexplicable. Perhaps this is the greatest leap of spirituality towards science. Seeing is believing, and not believing is seeing. Religion with blind faith and a conditioned mind is the greatest obstacle to spiritual evolution. In the name of religion or faith, man kills fellow human beings with no remorse. The aftermath of such mass murders is the shedding of copious tears by widows and orphans that would be greater than the waters of 7 oceans. The Buddha was compassion incarnate, and his greatest compassion is in not forcing us to believe anything. His religion gives freedom in the beginning and liberates man in the end. In spite of all the differences, the Hindus have accepted the Buddha, the great Shakyamuni, as an incarnation of their god Vishnu. His meditation techniques of Vipassana gave new dimensions to pranayama. Vipassana is a unique experiment of pratyahar, dharana and dhyana. It is the world's most practiced technique for attaining enlightenment. About 2 centuries after Buddha, Emperor Ashoka engraved the Buddha's teachings on rocks and installed pillars and inscriptions all over his empire. Ashoka was passionate about Buddhism. The empire of Ashoka was the biggest ever in India. These boundaries were never conquered by the mighty forces of the Mughals or the British. His vast empire remained intact even after he abandoned the policy of war and embraced the policy of compassion. It is astonishing that the land which is caught in the storm of violence today was once ruled by the principles of compassion and non-violence. Today it may seem impractical that non-violence can be the policy of a nation. But 2,500 years ago, someone had shown the path. Emperor Ashoka got these caves carved at Barabar for the Ajivikas, the non-believers. They were also used by other practitioners. These superbly polished granite caves are testimony to the many secret practices of yoga. They are perhaps the oldest epitome of Indian secularism. Emperor Chandragupta, grandfather of Ashoka, was the follower of Sanatana Hindu Dharma, and Chanakya, Chandragupta's legendary guru, was an orthodox Brahmin. Later in life, Chandragupta embraced Jainism and moved to South India at Shravan-Belgola. In his memory, this place is known as Chandragiri. He became a disciple of the great Jain monk Bhadrabahu. This episode is engraved here. In those days, it was not uncommon for members of one family to practice different religions. Also, people could embrace different religions during their lifetime. This liberal culture of India made the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali neutral for all religions and sects. However, these sutras show the influence of 2 Shraman traditions. The Yam and the Niyam are influenced by Jainism, whereas meditation and Samadhi have the imprints of Buddhism. The Jain tradition is older than the Buddhist. Its first Tirthankar, Rishabdev, is also mentioned in the Vedas. Rishabdev was a perfected soul, equally respected by Jains and Hindus. Rishab means bull and reminds us of Pashupati, Lord of the beasts. It is quite likely that the concept of Shiva and Rishabdev may have originated from the same source. Rishabdev is also known as Adinath, the first and primal yogi. The first yogi of Hatha Yoga is also called Adinath. The word Nath occurs as the names of many Tirthankaras. and the word Nath is also used by Hatha Yogis. In both these traditions, Nath means Swami, conqueror of the senses. Tirthankars are called Jinn because of their victory over the senses. In India, it is believed that to conquer self is far more difficult than conquering a war. Blissful is the one who is liberated. Liberated is the one who has conquered the senses. To keep the passionate mind, the governor of the senses, under control is a difficult task. This asana, meant for physical penance, is known as Parvat Asana or Kayot Sarga Mudra. It is also the original Tadasana. Patanjali has defined asana as that state in which the body remains comfortably steady for a long time. The standing posture has steadiness but no comfort. Most of the Jain Tirthankars are shown in the standing posture, Tadasana, leaving the sitting posture, Sukhasana. Here stands Bahubali, the son of Rishabdev. He remained standing in Tadasana for such a long time that the creepers climbed all over his body. The moral conduct of Jain aspirants goes beyond the limits of bodily suffering. Patanjali defined Yama as Vrat, self-discipline. If anyone practices them religiously for life, these Vrats become Mahavrats, supreme self-discipline. Perhaps under the influence of Jainism, Patanjali called Yama Mahavrat, the supreme self-discipline. The world hails the hero, the Veer, who shows prowess in the battlefield. But India calls the conqueror of the self, Mahavir, the greatest hero. Non-violence is the supreme dharma. This may be the core ideal of Jainism, but surprisingly is not found in any of their ancient texts. Brother slashed the chest of his brother to color the hair of his wife with blood, but the outcome of that horrifying war was non-violence is the supreme dharma. This great saying is found in the Mahabharata. It is said, the one who has not known the Mahabharata has not known India. There is no knowledge like Sankhya and no power like Yoga. This saying is also found in the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata in its core is a story of a family conflict. The enormity and dreadfulness of this war has deeply influenced the mindset of generations of Indians. The Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, further revolutionized yoga. Here, yoga moves out of the caves and jungles and is used as an indispensable tool to tackle the harsh realities of life. Yoga is considered essential even to win a war, the most horrendous of all acts in life. The Gita is not a philosophical text on yoga, but an inspirational poem. The composer of Gita is passionate about yoga. Each chapter concludes with the word yoga. All the 25 elements of Sankhya Philosophy and the 8 limbs of yoga are expounded in its 18 chapters. In chapter 6, even the technique of yoga is described.
तो कुछ ही काम कर, उसका क्या फल निकलेगा तेरे हाथ में नहीं है। अब इसमें किसी ईश्वर, आत्मा, परमात्मा, श्रद्धा की जरूरत नहीं है। अपन सब जानते हैं, अपन सारे प्रयत्न करते हैं, कुछ सफल भी हो जाते हैं, कुछ असफल भी हो जाते हैं। हमारे हाथ में फल नहीं है, ये पहली बात कह दी, ये कर्मयोग है। और दूसरी बात कह दी कि फल तेरे हाथ में नहीं है, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है हाथ पे हाथ रख के बैठ जा। कर्म में जितनी कुशलता कर सके उतनी कुशलता बरत। तो कुशलता के 2 लक्षण दे दिए, योग है कर्मसु कौशलम, कर्म कुशलता का नाम योग है, और समत्वम योग उच्चते, और समता में रहने का नाम योग है। ये कर्म योग हो गए। सुख दुख में, उतार चढ़ाव में जीवन के व्यक्ति विचलित न हो, अविचलित रह सके। कॉमन सेंस की बातें हैं, इनका किसी संप्रदाय से, किसी निष्ठा से, किसी मान्यता से संबंध नहीं है।
The first 5 centuries AD are known as the classic age in Indian history. in the field of science, philosophy, and literature. During this time, a yogi named Vyasa wrote a commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which came to be known as Vyas Bhashya. Today, this commentary is the best way to understand the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This was also the time when Buddhism attained its height. From here on, the older Hinayana Buddhism was expanded by the Mahayana school of thought.
बौद्ध दर्शन 4 दर्शन भागों में विभक्त है, वैभाषिक, सौत्रांतिक, योगाचार और माध्यमिक.
Yogachar. This term was used when yoga and meditation techniques were incorporated into Buddhism. The Shadang Yoga of Buddhism consists of 6 steps. They all have the depth and influence of Buddhist philosophy. The introduction of Tantra in Buddhist philosophy was brought about by Asanga and Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna, the promulgator of Shunyavad, was also the master of alchemy. He was probably the chancellor of Nalanda University. It is believed he had discovered many facts about the blood circulation system and blood cells. He was also exploring the secret of longevity by rejuvenating the body with the help of alchemy. Iron gets rusted, but not gold. The body also decays with the rust of old age. While seeking to convert iron into gold, the sages must have also explored the possibility of a longer life. It is not known whether they were successful in turning iron into gold, but the people of that era certainly succeeded in producing an iron which has not rusted till today. Yoga also set a goal of keeping the human body free from the rust of old age and making it strong as a diamond, like Vajra. Vajrayana philosophy of Buddhism begins with the text Guhya Samaj Tantra. The author of this text was Asanga of the Yogachar branch. In the 5th century emerged another great scholar, Acharya Buddha Ghosh, who wrote the treatise Vishuddhi Magg.
विशुद्धि कहते हैं निर्वाण को, और उसका मग्ग कहते हैं मार्ग को, मन निर्वाण प्राप्त करने का मार्ग. तो निर्वाण प्राप्त करने का मार्ग जो है बौद्धों के हिसाब से ध्यान ही हो सकता है. तो ध्यान कब होगा? जब आदमी शीलवान होगा. तो पहले विशुद्धि मार्ग में शील का अध्याय है, उसके बाद फिर ध्यान के अध्याय हैं, और उसके बाद शील समाधि और फिर प्रज्ञा. प्रज्ञा से ही अंत में चल करके निर्वाण का साक्षात्कार होता है.
The meditation technique of Mahayana is far more standardized and complex. There is a long chain of meditations.
इस तरह से 40 कम्मठान होते हैं. कम्मठान कहते हैं ध्यान के आलंबन को. पाली शब्द है कम्मठान, और कर्मस्थान उसका संस्कृत हो सकता है. तो कर्म करना माने ध्यान भावना करने का स्थान माने आलंबन 40 प्रकार के कहे गए हैं. इसलिए कहे गए हैं कि 40 प्रकार के चरित्र वाले व्यक्ति होते हैं. तो कौन चरित्र वाले को कौन सा आलंबन लाभकारी होगा, इस दृष्टि से वहाँ पर 40 प्रकार के विशुद्धि मार्ग में आलंबन का वर्णन है. उसमें श्वास प्रश्वास भी एक है.
Meditation on breath, meditation on happiness, meditation on various parts of the body, meditation on 4 higher planes of consciousness, meditation on 10 forms of knowledge. Although monks used to live in these caves for performing rituals, some caves were exclusively meant for meditation. Through deep meditation, the monks sought to conquer their natural animal instincts to attain higher human values. These dark caves were the lighthouses of Indian society. The elevation of Indian consciousness has a long story which has traversed through these dark caves. Even today, there are terrorizing attacks from across the northwest borders, but India has never attacked in revenge. This is not from cowardice. A natural aversion towards violence was instilled by our ancestors through their immense will and example. People generally ask what to meditate about and what to meditate upon. This treatise describes 112 ways of meditation. The Vigyan Bhairav, written in the 8th century, belongs to the Shaiv philosophy of Kashmir. Many of its 112 ways or dharnas are free from any religion, belief, or sect. The practice of concentrating on the tip of a mountain or on a barren desert helps the practitioner to focus his vision on nothingness. When the mind is devoid of the support of an object, the modifications of Chitta Consciousness change into nothingness. There is joy in touch, sight, smell, and taste, and also in music. The yogi, in a trance of singing, can immerse himself in blissfulness, and his Chitta Consciousness experiences extraordinary vigor. In such a state, the outer objects disappear, and only the knower remains. In love, the state of ecstasy is considered equal to the bliss of Brahm, the Supreme. In this state, the duality of male and female get annihilated, and only the highest state of bliss remains. Meditating upon this blissfulness, the chit of the practitioner gets intensely concentrated. This meditation technique is explained at length in Tantra and is depicted here in these sculptures and paintings. The history and literature of Tantra is vast. The literal meaning of the word Tantra is expanse, but it is difficult to find a single definition of Tantra. It is said that Tantra does not believe in the ethical bindings of yoga, and that Tantrics embrace many practices from which yogis abstain. But in reality, it is incorrect to say that Tantra practitioners are unethical or without character.
Janani
Tantra is inspired by the power of procreation of a female, not its carnal pleasures. The importance of sexuality is emphasized in Tantra only because it is related to our birth. Our entry into this world is a wondrous miracle, and its origin is the female body. Yoga stands against death, and birth always defeats death. Therefore, yoga bows before the one who gives birth, the procreator, and the act of procreation. These bronze idols are among the best sculptures in the world. In spite of modern techniques, today's craftsmen would find it hard to convey these expressions in their work. There is evidence that the craftsmen used to meditate upon the deity first and then transform their experiences into their work of art. Here, art has a dual purpose. For the craftsman, it is a test of his meditation, and for the viewer, the potential for the art to permeate his heart. Therefore, the creation of a sculpture is also a means and a goal for meditation. Tantra says, unless you become divine yourself, you cannot truly worship divinity. Divinity in the human body can be brought about by the practice of the yoga technique of dharana. Dharana brings divinity to the body, part by part. This process of Tantra is called न्यास.
ऐसा सिद्धांत ये है कि देवम भूत्वा देवम यजेत, देवता होकर देवता का यजन करें। अब प्रश्न ये है कि तो किस स्थिति में जाके फिर हमें ये इस बात के अधिकार मिलेगा कि हम देवता का अर्चन कर सकें, तो बहुत दिक्कत हो जाती है। परंतु प्रक्रिया वही अपनानी पड़ती है जिससे कि वो देवत्व का आना शुरू हो, और जो न्यास को सिद्ध कर लेता है जो महापुरुष, उसको किसी को प्रणाम करने की आवश्यकता नहीं है, बल्कि वर्जित है।
Indian humanism elevates a human being to the level of a deity. Western humanism developed by opposing religion. Therefore, it has become devoid of spirituality and ended up with materialism. But in India, yoga helped develop humanism with spiritualism. Therefore, even the progressive mind finds peace in it. The experiences of meditation are beyond the senses. To be immersed in meditation, one has to transcend the intellect, because the intellect cannot describe these experiences. 1500 years ago, an unknown yogi created an astounding sculpture here. The experiences of spiritual serenity and grandeur have been personified in this cave. This is the expression of the pure infinite state of being, the pinnacle of yogic experience, a state of mind that remains unmoved even by the end of the world. Taking the limitations of the human face, the three-dimensional reality of creation, existence, and destruction have been expressed on these rocks. That which scriptures fail to convey, a Shiva yogi unveiled on this rock.
It's a masterpiece, and a placed image in front. On one side is the Agora aspect, the fierce form of Shiva. On the other side, the polar opposite, what you call the Uma Vaktra, that is connected with the female aspect. So all this is combined, and the fourth face we cannot see, but you have to visualize that there would have been a fourth face and the fifth face, which is always invisible, which only the yogis can see. That also, that is the Ishana face. He must have been some sort of a yogi. He must have also, in his dhyana, he must have conceived these things. And there is an image of Shiva as yogi also in Elephanta as you enter from the north entrance.
In Kashmir, a lot of literature is found on the Shiva philosophy. Shiva texts are called Agam. Agam has 4 chapters. The 4 feet of Shiva represent these 4 chapters. After the 10th century, many Upanishads were written exclusively on yoga. In Yoga Tattva Upanishad, 4 types of yoga are described. The yoga that was popular at this time cannot be appreciated without the understanding of the Kundalini. Kundalini is that primordial power of nature which lies dormant deep within the spiritual realm of the human body. The 3 coils of Kundalini represent the 3 basic elements of Sankhya, and the half coil signifies the transcendent state of Chitta Consciousness. This power is not physical, hence it cannot be seen even by a microscope. The nature of Kundalini is pranic. Kundalini is the primordial form of prana inside the body. Prana, in simple terms, is energy or force of the body. The prana flows through 72,000 channels called nadis. The 3 major nadis exist in the spinal cord, Ida, Pingala and Sushmana. These words are not found in ancient Sanskrit literature. The word prana can be traced in Vedic literature, but the concept developed more in the Tamil region.
These are all the words which you could not convert them in Sanskritized. This originality, Idagalai, Pingalai, Shudumudai, this type of words you cannot see in any languages at all.
The entire body is primarily governed by 5 types of pranas. They are Pran, Apan, Saman, Vyan and Udan. In the central part of Kundalini, only 2 pranas flow. One is Pran and the other is Apan. When the Kundalini lies dormant, the movement of these 2 prans are in opposite directions. Pran moves upward and Apan moves downward. The flow is either in the right or the left nadi, but at certain times it is in both. When asana, pranayam, mudra and bandha are performed, this knot in the navel is released and pran meets apan, and together they enter the central nadi sushmana. The pressure of both makes the kundalini rise upward, penetrating through the chakras of the body. With this movement, the dormant physical, mental and spiritual energies are awakened in the chakras.
और ये वाकई ही सर्पाकार की तरह यूं यूं करती हुई ऊपर जाती है कि जब ये ऊपर जाती है तो somewhere here in the middle of elongate eye ऊपर जा करके कोई स्पॉट है जहाँ ये टच करती है और उसको टच होते ही सारे क्रेनियम के अंदर लाइट जल जाती है और कई आपको वहाँ पे नॉब्स छोटे सैकड़ों नॉब्स आपको नजर आएंगे और लाइटेड अप और सब उस प्रकाश के अंदर होता है एंड देन इट गोज बैक. वास्तव में मूलाधार कोई छोड़ती ही नहीं है, इसकी पूंछ वहीं लगी हुई है. द बॉडी ट्रेवल्स लाइक दिस बट द कंटिन्यूटी इज मेंटेन्ड देयर. उसके बाद ये जब रिट्रैक्ट करती है तो उसी तरह रिट्रैक्ट होकर वापस आ जाती है और उसके साथ ही मेरुदंड के अंदर बाहर की तरफ मतलब ऑन द स्किन आपको बड़ी सुखद ठंडी अनुभूति होती है एंड एज इफ कोई पानी की बूंदें आप पे किसी ने डाल दी हैं ऐसा.
The concept of chakras may have been inspired by the discovery of vital points in the human body by Ayurveda. The medieval period Hatha Yogis of North India could have adopted them from the Tamil Siddhas of the south. The shape of chakra is conceived in the form of a lotus. In India, the concept of existence is like a lotus floating serenely in a deluge. The symbol of the world is the lotus. Ironically, the symbol of detachment from the world is also a lotus. And the best posture for yogis is also the lotus posture. According to ancient Indian thought, the origin of the universe is from sound. That primordial sound is still resonating in different layers of our consciousness.
कंठमूले धूम्रवर्णे षोडशजले विशुद्धे अमामि मे मुम ह्रीं 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 मे ओम. हृदय प्रदेशे रक्तवर्णे द्वादशजले अनाहत चक्रे कं खं गं गं चं 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 टं. अहम देवो न चान्योऽस्मि ब्रह्मैवाहं न शोकभाक् सच्चिदानंद रूपोऽहम् आत्मानमिति भावयेत्. हकारेण बहिर्याति सकारेण विशेत पुनः हंस हंसात्मकां भगवतीं जीवो जपति सर्वदा.
पदपङ्कजं देहि.
Around 1000 AD, some extraordinary temples were built in a circular shape similar to the chakras. At the center of the temple, there is one deity. On the circumference, there are several. Attached to each deity is an animal, similar to the chakras of Kundalini. These deities are called Yoginis, and these temples are known as the Yogini Temples. Here, the grace and contours of the asana seem to have transcended even the imagination of the sculptor. But invaders in medieval times disfigured their faces and destroyed their beauty. Many expressions of yogic experiences are now lost forever. Although the yoginis of these temples are divine yogic deities, a cult of women yoginis also existed during this time.
हुम हुम हुंकार रूपिणी जम 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 वनाधिनी भ्रां भ्रीं भ्रूं भैरवी भद्रे Bhavane te namo namah.
During the Harappa Civilization, it was shown that women were probably the center of yoga, but with the passage of time, they gradually disappeared from the scene of yoga. The 64 Yogini sect seems to be the last remnant of their existence. Sankhya believes that every unit of consciousness is an independent entity, and since it is detached and pure, it also has divinity. Therefore, in India it is believed that there are as many gods as there are people. This is the height of spiritual democracy and owes its existence to Sankhya, the philosophy of yoga. But among the presence of millions of gods and goddesses in India, the eminence that Lord Shiva enjoys is enormous. There are Shiva temples all over the country. For the last 5,000 years, Shiva has been worshipped in different forms. From Mount Kailash in Tibet to Rameshwaram in the south, the Hindu mind is influenced by Lord Shiva. On his journey in time and space, Shiva never abandoned the yogic form. In all his temples, we find the Kundalini of Hatha Yoga. At the base of the spinal cord, the Kundalini lies dormant in this way. The way in which the many manifestations of Lord Shiva have inspired Indian literature, art and society has no parallel. In dedication to the first yogi, Lord Shiva, stands the magnificent Kandarya Mahadev Temple of Khajuraho. In the temples of Khajuraho, Maya, called illusion in the Vedanta, takes the form of the powerful Prakriti of Sankhya. Lazing around in Tamagun, playfully enjoying in Rajogun, and glowing internally in Sattvagun, this is all Prakriti. Her singing, dancing and playing creates surges of emotion. The whole ambience of the temples resonates with her presence. The presence of Purushya, it seems, is just for company. Here the statue of Purush is in a state described in Sankhya. The famous thinker Bankim Chandra Chatterjee says that it is the flag of Sankhya, not Tantra, that flies over the temples of Khajuraho. Here on the temple walls, elements of Hatha Yoga and Tantra are cleverly hidden. Sitting in a beautiful lotus asana with his wife is the king of Khajuraho. His posture indicates that he did not indulge in material pleasures, but was an ascetic and a practitioner of yoga. In those days, it was customary to hide real knowledge from the unworthy. The normal mind, full of passion, will be mesmerized by the erotic figures, but a person in quest of knowledge will see the secrets behind the forms. The place where the sanctum sanctorum joins the adjacent pavilion can be called the place of union of the soul and Brahma. The relief depicting sexual union is installed only at this juncture.
Sandhya Bhasha, code language. It is not to be revealed again to the non-initiate. For instance, they would say that the yogi is embraced by washerwoman, that is Dombi. Now, Dombi is the word they use for Kundalini energy. So, Dombi is embracing the yogi in his neck. That means the Kundalini has risen to the fifth chakra, Vishuddha chakra of the neck. There is unification of the two breaths, Prana and Apana, or Pingala and Ida, or Surya and Chandra. So that when that unification takes place, the yogi goes into the state of timelessness, when non-duality, where there is neither day nor night, that is again Sandhya.
These ascetics make extensive use of Sandhya Bhasha, a language having dual meaning. These yogis are called Kanphata, meaning pierced ears, and belong to the Nath cult. They are disciples of Gorakhnath. Historians believe that Gorakhnath was a Hatha yogi who lived sometime between the 8th and 12th century and was probably born in Bengal. An Indian folklore legend has it that he was a great Hatha yogi who had prolonged his life through yoga and alchemy. Gorakhnath was a disciple of Matsyendranath, and Matsyendranath was a disciple of Lord Shiva, or Adinath, the first and foremost yogi. Matsyendranath is believed to have been born into a fisherman's family in Bengal or Assam during the 8th and 10th century. He is considered the founder of Hatha Yoga and is believed to be the originator of the Yogini Kol sect of Tantra. This text named Kol Gyan Nirnay is ascribed to him. Today, where the Samkhya Temple stands, Matsyendranath is said to have performed Yogini Sadhana. This place was once the stronghold of yoga. Very few people know that the original name of this city, surrounding the temples on the banks of the Brahmaputra, was not Gauhati, but Yogihati, the place of the yogis. Why Matsyendranath left Assam and came to Nepal is a legendary story, whose essence is that he was a yogi who dedicated his life to the well-being of the people of Nepal. This is the Matsyendranath Temple. This is the Matsyendra Asan, developed by Matsyendranath, and is said to be very effective in curing diabetes. It was Gorakhnath who brought Matsyendranath to Nepal. Therefore, Gorakhnath is worshipped as the national tutelary deity of Nepal. There are many references to him all over the Indian subcontinent. Much folklore surrounds Matsyendranath and Gorakhnath. These people here are singing their stories. Gorakhnath appeared at a time when the rigidity of the caste system was at its worst. Brahmins had total control over knowledge, but lower caste Hindus were hungry for spiritual guidance. Gorakhnath prevented their mass conversion to other religions by attacking the caste system and meaningless rituals, and making the teachings accessible to all. Bhakti, the movement of social revolution through devotion, is also indebted to him. His teachings deeply influenced great saints like Meera, Tadu, Wajid, Baba Farid, and Kabir. Guru Nanak was also moved by his wisdom. Inspired by Gorakhnath, Yogi Swatmaram wrote Hatha Yoga Pradipika in the 14th century AD. This text is the quintessence of Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga Pradipika mentions 84 major asanas. Bhadrasana, which you saw on the 5,000-year-old Harappa seal, is illustrated in this book. Today, the yoga that has become popular all over the world is really the asanas of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Hatha Yoga places more emphasis on the purification of the body, and its practice begins with the 6 steps of purification called Shatkarma. The importance given to the physical body by Hatha Yoga and Tantra is truly unique in the history of spirituality. In Hatha Yoga, the human body is seen not as a source of suffering, but an effective and reliable tool to eternal life. Since spiritual liberation is possible in this very birth, a healthy body is considered essential towards that end. Yoga here is synonymous with health. Patanjali considered disease as an obstacle in yoga, but Hatha Yoga became a technique for curing diseases. Some even consumed chemicals like processed mercury to keep the body young. Their motto was, "May the body always remain like gold." It is believed that Gorakhnath used cannabis to rejuvenate his body.
He has consumed and attained the longevity with that. That is why even the ganja or the cannabis sativa, cannabis is today it is documented as a Gorakh Muli.
The disciples of Gorakhnath tried so many remedies to keep the body young that some people ridiculed them as the malpractices of Gorakh, calling it Gorakh Dhanda. Hatha Yoga stands on the 4 pillars of Asan, Pranayam, Mudra and Nadanusandhan. Nadanusandhan is the merging of Chitta Consciousness in Anhata Nad, the unstruck sound.
ओम। जो खरज का तार है उसे हम रीम का जैसे इसको रिम माना जाता है।
His sleeping with opened eyes has a hidden meaning. Whenever we sleep, our eyes are closed and we are completely unaware of our surroundings. However, our consciousness perceives everything during sleep. It even witnesses our sleep. It witnesses every act and every state of Prakriti. The reclining Lord Vishnu here is the symbol of Purush, a restful consciousness in every living being. This idol adorns the Ranganatha Temple in South India. This temple was the center of the Bhakti or devotional movement for centuries. The devotional or Bhakti movement originated from the Tamil region, where the rich traditions of Alvar and Nainar devotees were in existence. It is said that the Bhakti movement of the south was brought to the north by Saint Ramanand in the 13th century. Patanjali described God as an instrument for the cessation of the mind, but in the tradition of devotion, God manifested in many forms. Bhakti is a movement based on humanism, because here, the devotee is considered more important than God. Perhaps for this reason, the Bhakti movement always talked about social reforms.
माला फेरी तिलक लगाया लंबी जटा बढ़ाता है अंतर तेरे कुफर कटारी यूं नहीं साहिब मिलता है माला फेरी तिलक लगाया. अरत उरत की गंगा जमुना.
The Hatha Yoga of Gorakhnath, combined with the emotions of Bhakti, greatly influenced the teachings of Kabir. Yogic references appear prominently in the compositions of Kabir. Another prominent figure of the Bhakti movement is Mirabai. She was not influenced by Hatha Yoga, but her Chitta consciousness can be compared to the Sampragyat Samadhi of Patanjali. As Patanjali says, concentration is achieved if practiced with great intensity. In the 8th century AD, Acharya Shankar wrote, concentration is achieved much faster if practiced with extreme intensity. The devotion of Meera is a striking example of an intensely focused state of mind.
मत जा जोगी चूड़ियाँ फोड़ो मांग बिखेरूं मैं मांग बिखेरूं.
It is also believed that Meera was named after the Sufi saint Meera Sahib. The Sufi tradition seeks the ultimate height of divine love. Meera is a shining example of that love. On one hand, Sufis wanted Hindus to discard caste discrimination and untouchability and to love Allah. On the other hand, they opened the doors of yoga for Muslims.
बहुत से सूफिया के बारे में आता है कि उनकी हिंदू योगियों से मुलाकातें रहती थी। शेख नसरुद्दीन महमूद चिराग दहली के बारे में आता है कि हिंदू योगियों से उनकी मुलाकातें रहीं। खुद शेख चिश्ती के बारे में आता है कि बहुत से हिंदू योगी उनसे मुनाजरा करने आते थे। तो योगियों से इंटरेक्शन रहा। और मुस्लिम सूफिया ने जब देखा कि उनकी ये प्यूरिफिकेशन ऑफ सोल या भूत शुद्धि की जो ये टेक्निक्स हैं जिसको इस्तेमाल करते हैं, इसके फ़ायदे होते हैं और इनमें इस्लामिक फ़ेथ के ख़िलाफ़ कोई चीज़ है नहीं, लिहाजा उसको एक्सेप्ट करने में उन्हें किसी तरह की दुश्वारी नहीं थी। तो ज़ाहिर है एक सूफ़ी जब मुराक़बा करता है तो फिर ख़ास तरह से यानी अज़कार करना चाहता है, वो ख़ास तरह से ज़िक्र करता है, यानी अल्लाह 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 यही कहता है, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ ब्रीथ कंट्रोल भी करता है। और वो समझता है कि अगर हम इस तरह से हम मेडिटेशन करेंगे तो हमें स्पिरिचुअल अटेनमेंट जल्दी मिलेगी। बहुत से सूफिया के यहाँ वो सिलसिलों में, ख़ासकर कादरिया सिलसिले में ज़्यादातर जो अज़कार किए जाते हैं, लिटानीज़ किए जाती हैं, मेडिटेशंस किए जाते हैं, वो क्रॉस लेग्ड सिटिंग में की जाती हैं।
कृपा की जो दर्शन दी जो सोए भाग जगइयो, कृपा की जो दर्शन दी जो सोए भाग जगइयो, मौला अली के सदक़े में कभी मेरे घर भी आइयो, मुझे जिक्र पा करो महाराज।
और बहुत से मेडिटेशन की टेक्निक्स ऐसी हैं जिनके बारे में उन्होंने कहा कि अगर तुम इनको करना चाहो तो तुमको वेजिटेरियन बनना पड़ेगा।
Bowls are a living tradition linked to the ancient Siddhas of the Shaiva sect and also to the Nath tradition. Today, when a bowl pays obeisance to Lord Shiva, time completes a full circle. For centuries, India faced marauding invasions from across its northwest borders. All these invaders were completely ignorant about the spiritual traditions engraved in Indian sculptures. They destroyed these precious artifacts ruthlessly, which were meant to liberate the mind, an irreparable loss to history. When Bakhtiyar Khilji burnt the libraries of Nalanda and Vallabhi, many Buddhist monks and nuns fled across the Himalayas, where yoga flourished again under the umbrella of Tantra. This is among the highest regions on earth. Geographical distance, difficult access, and harsh weather conditions keep it isolated from the rest of the world. This is Ladakh. This is one of the oldest Buddhist monasteries in this region. These paintings are about 1,000 years old. A Vajrayani monk, Guru Naropa, had practiced meditation for many years in this cave. The lamas of this region achieve remarkable control over their bodies through meditation. In temperatures where a layperson may freeze, these lamas wrap their bodies with a wet cloth and dry it many times over. Even today, many monks here engage in meditation continuously for 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days. While the Buddhist Tantra was flourishing in the Himalayas, the Shaiva yogis were propagating the tradition of Hatha Yoga Pradipika in the Gangetic plains of India. In the 17th century, Sage Gherand composed the Gherand Sanhita. Here 84 asanas are mentioned and 32 are illustrated. The total number of asanas is considered to be 8.4 million. The writings on yoga techniques continued even after the Gherand Sanhita. In 1719, a yogi, Paya Hari Baba, lived here. His disciple, Yogi Jetaram, wrote a book called Yogasan Mala, where 110 asanas are described with diagrams. Detachment in the midst of royal luxury is not uncommon in the land of Buddha and Mahavir. Here lived the king of Jodhpur, Maharaja Man Singh. Man Singh was also a poet. Man Singh composed poems on yoga and renunciation that are even sung today.
देवनाथ कृपा करिए सुरता प्यारी जिए लोय सुरता
Man Singh accepted Yogi Devanath of the Nath cult as his guru. He built temples and monasteries for the Nath yogis. Golden wall paintings on Hatha Yoga adorn the inside of this temple, but they are fast disappearing due to negligence. Many secrets of Hatha Yoga and the science of nadis are hidden in these paintings. Now, there is almost no one to explain them. India in the 18th century experienced caste discrimination, superstition, and dogmatism. Later, by the end of the 19th century, the British establishment astounded the minds of Indians by the charisma of their literature, knowledge, and science. Around the same time, this famous Kali temple was built. Here lived a famous priest called Rama Krishna Paramhans. He was one of the greatest yogis of the 19th century. It is not a coincidence that he was a devotee of Mother Goddess. Who else would a yogi worship other than Mother Nature, Prakriti? One of the spiritual masters of Ramakrishna was Avadut Totapuri. Here, Totapuri has ushered Ramakrishna to the last door of complete freedom. But the last door is not opening, and Totapuri is perturbed.
देखो रामकृष्ण, तुम अद्वैत की साधना में एक उंगल भी नहीं बढ़ पाए हो। मेरा धीरज खो रहा है, मैं चलता हूँ।
मैं क्या करूँ? जब भी ध्यान लगाता हूँ, माँ काली की प्रतिमा सामने आ जाती है।
तो उठाओ तलवार और टुकड़े कर दो काली के।
वहाँ कहाँ से लाऊंगा तलवार?
काली की प्रतिमा कहाँ से लाए? जिस चित्त से तुमने प्रतिमा की छवि बनाई है, उसी चित्त से तलवार भी बनाओ।
ठीक है, मैं कोशिश करता हूँ।
करो, कोशिश करो। उठाओ, उठाओ, तलवार उठाओ, उठाओ तलवार, उठाओ।
नहीं गुरुदेव, ये मुझसे नहीं हो रहा।
नहीं हो रहा? घबराओ मत, घबराओ नहीं, घबराओ नहीं। ये देखो, ये देखो।
And Ramakrishna immersed in samadhi, into the ultimate state of being, free from the last support. It is called Asampragyat Samadhi, the final stage of Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga. Yoga which descended in such perfection that Ramakrishna was a spiritual wonder. He became a Paramhans. Legend has it that when a poor outcast was beaten with a cane, the marks of injury appeared on the back of Ramakrishna. The doctrine of Vedanta says that a single consciousness permeates all of us. We are all but one consciousness. We may have read it in books, but it was visibly evident in Ramakrishna Paramhans. So far, we have completed the 6,000-year journey of the history of yoga. Alongside, we have also completed yet another journey. From searching for Yam and Niyam in the lives of the peace-loving people of the Indus Valley, we journeyed to the summit of Asampragyat Samadhi. The last support of meditation of Ramakrishna has thus fallen. The triangle of the knower, the knowledge, and the known has dissolved. This is the ultimate state of being. Yoga is the surest path which arrives at the summit of being, not philosophy, not even science. The experiences in yoga are beyond science, but they are now being quantified and verified by science. This work began when Vivekananda, Ramakrishna's greatest disciple, wrote Raj Yoga in the light of modern science. His Raj Yoga instilled the desire for freedom in educated Indians, and they started demanding their political freedom. The westward journey of yoga begins in 1893, when Vivekananda traveled to America. From here, the scientific experiments on yoga began.
चाहते हम हैं कि लर्नड बिहेवियर, हमारा जो सेरेब्रल ब्रेन है, ये हमारे जन्मजात व्यवहार को पूरी तरह से नियंत्रित कर सके। ये आज के मनुष्य की, आज के समाज की मूल समस्या है, मैं कहूँगा। ये कौन नहीं जानता कि रिश्वत लेना गलत है, झूठ बोलना गलत है, चोरी करना गलत है। हर व्यक्ति को ये मालूम है, लेकिन ये ज्ञान हमारे व्यवहार को बदल नहीं सकता, क्योंकि ये ज्ञान जाकर के सिर्फ हमारे सेरेब्रल ब्रेन में रिकॉर्ड हो गया है, लेकिन जब करने का समय आता है तो वो हमारा इंस्टिंक्टिव ब्रेन काम करता है और वो मानता नहीं आपकी बात, वो इंडिपेंडेंट है। धीरे धीरे हमारे इंटेलिजेंट ब्रेन का कंट्रोल इंस्टिंक्टिव ब्रेन पे, नीचे के ब्रेन पे इतना हो जाएगा कि मैं जो सही समझता हूँ वही करूँगा, जो गलत समझता हूँ मैं करूँगा ही नहीं। लेकिन दुर्भाग्य से इतना विकास होने में कई लाख वर्ष लगेंगे। विकास की जो प्रक्रिया है इतनी धीमी है कि बंदर से लेके हमारे मस्तिष्क आने में 15 लाख वर्ष लग गए। तो एक तो यह है कि हम कुछ नहीं करें, हाथ पे हाथ धरे हुए बैठे रहें और इंतज़ार करें। 10-5 लाख वर्षों में शायद मनुष्य ही देवता बन जाएंगे, कोई गलत काम करेंगे ही नहीं, बहुत ही अच्छा होगा। लेकिन इतना इंतज़ार कोई कर नहीं सकता। तो दूसरा उपाय ये है कि हम योग जैसे प्रक्रियाओं पर ध्यान दें, उन्हें और विकसित करें, उनका जीवन में उपयोग करें, और उससे हम जैसे एक घुड़सवार घोड़े पे बैठा है और एक तो उसके हाथ में कोई लगाम ही नहीं है, तो वो क्या करेगा, और एक ये है कि उसके हाथ में लगाम दे दी जाए तो वो बहुत कुछ उस घोड़े को नियंत्रित कर सकता है। तो योग एक तरह से हमारे इंटेलिजेंट ब्रेन को ऐसी लगाम प्रोवाइड करता है जिससे हम अपने इंस्टिंक्टिव ब्रेन को बहुत हद तक कंट्रोल कर सकें।
The biggest challenge for yoga today is to rein in the uncontrolled mind in this era of rapid technological advancement. Yoga has helped control our intellect from time immemorial and has elevated our consciousness to a new height. Therefore, we in India remind ourselves that our ancestors followed the path of yoga to reach God's abode. Mahajano yena gata sah pantha. The path traveled by great men is the path. Today, the younger generation is also aspiring to walk the same sacred path. Like Hatha Yogis, they also aspire. May the body remain like gold forever.
सदा रहे कंचन सी काया, काल न कब हूँ पे। सदा रहे कंचन सी काया, काल न कब हूँ पे। सदा रहे कंचन सी काया, काल न कब हूँ पे। सदा रहे कंचन सी काया, काल न कब हूँ पे। सदा रहे कंचन सी काया, काल न कब हूँ पे, सदा रहे कंचन सी काया, काल न कब हूँ पे, सदा रहे कंचन सी काया, काल न कब हूँ